Culture Exposé. We're spilling all the secrets every single day. From Hollywood lights to the gossip blinds. Catch the news, don't get left behind.
Welcome back to the final episode of season 1 of Pop Culture Exposé. I can't think of a better way to wrap things up with none other than today's amazing guest, Melissa Reich. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. If I'm not, I do apologize. Also known as the Bish Therapist. Melissa is a licensed therapist who has incredible knack for blending mental health insights with pop culture commentary. Whether she's breaking down celebrity drama or offering advice on emotional well-being along with sharing her own stories, her approach is always spot on. Today, we'll dive into her unique journey from therapy to pop culture and, of course, get her take on the world of celebrity gossip and blinds. Melissa, it is such a pleasure to have you here. I know my listeners would love to hear more about how you've carved out this unique space for yourself. So, tell us a bit about more about your journey, what led you to combine these two worlds, and if we can first start off with how to follow you.
Sure. Well, first of all, Danny, thank you so much for having me. You and I have been friendly for so long, and I followed your work, and so I'm grateful to be here. Number one. Number two, you did say my last name right. It's Melissa Reich. You got it. It is
Mm.
always mispronounced, but you got it. And the second thing where people can find me is so you can find me. It's at Your Bish Therapist, YOURBISH. And you can find me on Instagram is where I have my biggest following. But you can also find me on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube as well. You can find my podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's completely free. Currently in the midst of season 3 and just loving whatever this mashup that I'm doing is. Because if I'm being frank, I don't know that I know what it is either.
But
But I'm
it's such
happy
a
to be
nice
doing it.
variety, though. Very, very nice variety. Something for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. So, how I got started, it's a long story, but I'm going to make it more succinct is that, I'm not sure if you or your listeners are familiar with Amy Phillips.
Kyle. It's time, Kyle. We need to talk. Now, let me start. I know you were really hurt about what I said on Amazon Live, but I didn't even know that people watched it. So I was just, wasting time. No, you listen to me. I don't know what's going on with you. Who are you right now? I am tired of being tossed around like a dirty Beverly Beach bikini. I'm gonna need you to listen to me right now, okay? And I'm wondering if we were ever really friends to begin with, or if we were just on a reality show together. What?
So, yes, of course,
Yes.
Danny is. Yes. So, Amy Phillips, she had a radio show on Sirius XM, and I used to, I connected with her because I just really liked her. I DM'd her, and she liked me, and I started calling into the show because she's like, oh, I love that you're a real therapist and you really seem to have a knack for this. And so basically, she had me on her show. I wasn't even your Bish therapist. She wasn't even born yet. I was just Melissa. And the long and the short of it is that in 2020, I was going through cancer treatment. And so I had to step away from my practice, which was really devastating. And then, searching for what am I doing? Am I going back to practicing? This all fell in my lap. And it has been a very wild ride ever since.
And you've been killing it. It's been amazing
you.
watching your progression, the topics you've been covering. Also, congrats on some of the publications that you've made it into
Mhm.
as
Thank you.
well over the last year. It's really fun to watch your journey, Melissa.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Of course. Now, pop culture has been such a powerful influence on people, and clearly you have always had a love for it. whether or not it's Friends or reality TV. But what drew you into the world of celebrity and entertainment in the first place?
So I have to start out by saying that when I was a kid, I just loved TV. But I was one of those weird kids who I liked Dick Van Dyke and Mary Tyler Moore. Like I was like 8. And I loved these shows with these I think I'm a little bit of an old soul, and there was just something to me about the concept of TV that I just fell in love with first and foremost. And then, for me, being a therapist and enjoying pop culture, it's really kind of same. There's like a Venn diagram where there's a huge overlap because what I love is human behavior, right? So when we're looking at whether you're seeing someone one on one in therapy or you're watching something on TV, for me, it's just the sheer joy of kind of analyzing human behavior. And I really do have this obsessive need to figure out why people do the things they do, which was born of trauma, but now it's kind of my greatest asset. And so it was such a natural marriage for me of my natural, authentic desire to learn about human behavior and then marrying it with this second love that I have, which is television and trash television at that. So, a little bit guilty pleasure, a little bit educational, a little bit fascinating. It's a very rich tapestry.
Definitely. Now, you have made a name for yourself, of course, as a therapist, but now also as you cover pop culture topics that we have been going over, but also through your mental health lens. Can you share a bit about your journey? What inspired you to become a therapist, and how did you evolve into talking about pop culture? Beyond, what transpired in 2020 and Amy Phillips, just, really what was the catalyst to really spark that initial call in and all that other good stuff.
Sure. And so for me, I've had my backstory is I've had a lot of pain. I've had a lot of trauma. I've had so the long and the short of it is that I grew up with a father who was very abusive. And then when I was 17, I got cancer, and it's a long story, but I grew up in Illinois, and so my family moved me to Pennsylvania in the middle. So I did my freshman, sophomore year in Chicago, and my junior, senior year in a very small town in Pennsylvania where I still live. And when I got here, I then got cancer and people were allergic to me. And people were like, they didn't want to talk to me. I was the new girl. I was bald. I was walking through the halls. It was like very isolating. And so after that experience, I developed a really severe PTSD response, but I didn't know that it was happening for a long time. And so I had and so basically, I do this to share my experience, strength, and hope because I think that there was a whole trauma world going on in my brain when I was a therapist, and I didn't even know it, right? Because I was focusing so much on helping other people. I wasn't focusing on helping myself, which is, human nature. We do tend to do that, right? So when I started becoming aware of how my complex PTSD impacts me and how my pain has impacted me, it has led me to take my pain and turn it into purpose because I think to myself, well, what is the point of all of this pain, right? If I cannot do something to help other people. And so to some people what I do is silly, but for me it gives me the opportunity to really share concepts that are very serious, like about PTSD and about trauma and about domestic abuse and narcissistic abuse and all these things. And so a lot of folks follow me who are survivors and thrivers. And they say, I came for the Bravo, but I stayed for the insights. And that just really warms my heart because ultimately this isn't really about Bravo or TV. It's really just about helping people on a greater scale. And of course, we want to have fun too. So that's the other piece of it.
Yeah, completely agree. And that was also very beautifully said. I would say, of course, yes, I came for the Bravo as well, but I listened to all of your episodes because, of course, you do analyze and provide insight based off of your background for other situations, but you share so much about yourself, Melissa, and
Mhm.
you are so raw as well, which just adds a different dynamic, and a different trust as
Mhm.
well, but I really appreciate that aspect of you, so
Well,
thank you
thank
for
you.
being so vulnerable, and because of that, you have caused a big impact for also myself and my younger sister as well, who have gone through things throughout the years and maybe haven't spoken to someone yet, but we've made a pact after listening to your podcast to do
Oh
that
my
by the end of the
gosh.
year. So our time is ticking. We got
Oh.
2 months to wrap that up. But no, you've made us as women, as mothers, as survivors of certain aspects, just analyze certain things, um, if that makes sense, and also just wanna do better and seek help. So, thank you for the
Oh.
inspiration that you've been to me and also to my sister, and I'm sure to many other people, Melissa, so thank you.
I mean, that I literally could cry. I'm getting misty. That is I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to hear that because ultimately that is the most important thing to me. This isn't about, for me, people think I do this for uh, you know, for clout or for money, for whatever, which you as you know in this field, that's hilarious because,
Mhm.
money is hard to make. But really what you just said, when I lay my head down on the pillow tonight, I will feel super grateful that I've done my part. And so I just feel so happy to hear that. And I appreciate that.
Of course. You've definitely done your part. Getting into, though, the celebrity gossip and blind side of things, they are obviously so much fun, and especially fun for those of the pop culture fans, which is part of the reason prior to the episode starting, I told you I've been obsessed with blinds for 2 decades and I really need to unwire myself. But on the flip side, part of the reason why I need to unwire myself because it really walks a fine line. So, what are your thoughts on blinds in the gossip culture? Do you think it's harmless part of fandom, or is there a deeper impact we need to consider?
There is definitely a deeper impact. And there is, in psychology, the theory of anonymity is based on the idea that people can lose their sense of self awareness and concern for social norms when they feel anonymous, and it's a state known as de-individuation, which can lead to impulsive aggressive or antisocial behavior, especially online. So there have been studies since the 60s about how anonymity fuels or changes human behavior. And in the 60s, there was a gentleman by the name of Philip Zimbardo, who he created a study that became a benchmark in the field of psychology through Stanford University, which is, and this was in 1969, right? So it was like there wasn't the internet or anything like that, but they dressed female students in lab coats, some with plain and then some with identity concealing hoods. And basically, what they found, it was a formative piece of a body of research showing a link between anonymity and abusive behavior. What ended up happening is the folks who were hooded, who couldn't be seen, tended to give electric shocks to the Confederates. That's just the term that they use for, the people participating. Um, they gave shocks more frequently and more severely when they were anonymous. Now, having it be online adds a whole other layer to this concept that actually can be incredibly scary. So, research shows, because there is a lot of research about this, research shows that anonymity can reveal personality traits that face to face interactions may hide. But there are also some strong protective factors with anonymity, that it allows for, individuals to kind of like guide their behavior in a more moral sense. So Danny, kind of what you're saying is like, well, I've enjoyed this for years, but now I'm critically thinking about maybe some of the dark side to it,
Yeah.
and let me adjust my behavior, right? And you're doing that because you're a wonderful person. So kudos. There are people who don't think that way or feel that and only utilize it as a way to harm others. And so I could go on about this forever, but there is research to suggest that there are two motivations underlying the desire to stay anonymous in online social interactions. One is self-expression, right? Like that's you want to explore and have fun and all these things. But the other thing is toxic behavior. There are some individuals who use the cloak of anonymity to behave in ways that are egregious and aggressive towards other people. That's kind of what research shows.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, blinds are, I really do have trouble with that, because for me it's like, well, what is the motivation here, right? A blind is only as good as the person posting it, and as we know, people posting some of these blinds are very dangerous individuals. Some people, not all, some people
Yes.
are, right?
Correct. Yeah. Some,
Hmm.
not all. I think some go by a higher standard and a code of ethic. Not saying that anyone is 100%, but there are definitely different levels of the book that they go by, so to say.
Right. And so one of the things that research shows is that people who do have morals and values, like an internal moral guide, will use anonymity the same way they would use anything, right? They don't weaponize it. But there are some folks that do weaponize it. And one other thing I wanted to share that's really interesting is that there's a 2022 study published in Personality and Individual Differences, and so there are three traits that are really associated with dark personality traits, and then like a desire for anonymity. And so I just want to share those really quick, if that's okay.
Of course.
One of them is Machiavellianism, which is a term associated with individuals who tend to be manipulative, and they present deceptive and adaptable identities online. So basically, con men of the internet. That's a fancy way to say, there have always been con men before the internet, and the internet just gave them more anonymity and more opportunities to get out of accountability. And so this specific Machiavellianism is the name of a personality trait characterized by interpersonal manipulation, an indifference to morality, a lack of empathy, and a calculated focus on self-interest. Now, the second thing is psychopathology, which psychopathology is just essentially saying that antisocial behaviors come with a lack of empathy or remorse. So when you hear the term sociopathy or psychopath, it's all name for antisocial personality disorder, which is what underlies a lot of criminal behavior. So a lot of con men or con women, we obviously know there's no gender, there's no
Yes.
walls there. We can all con. But con people they just don't feel bad about it. And so there's this antisocial criminal aspect to it. And then the third thing that's really interesting is sadism. So sadism is positively associated with preferring an anonymous presence to fulfill their need to enjoy other people's suffering from the safety of their own home. So it's a very long and very complex answer, but to come back to the original question is, I definitely think that a blind is only as good as the person posting it. And as we know by, you talk a lot about anti-lawyer and all these other things, that there are people who weaponize anonymity, and then there are people who don't.
Very well said, Melissa. And thank you for all your expertise that you laid down on that. I really appreciate it. And of course, as a therapist, you have such a unique perspective also on the emotional and psychological tolls that this type of exposure can have. How do you think celebrity gossip and blinds not just affect the individuals involved, but their families and loved ones? For example, a couple of episodes back, I had Brian Procrast. He's coming out with a documentary in 2025 on Heather O'Rourke from Poltergeist. Because Auntie Lawyer put out a lot of crazy blinds about her death that, now her niece found out about on the internet and wondering, wait, is that really what happened to
Has
my
to do with
aunt?
Heather, has to do with Poltergeist and that whole fandom. There has been so much speculation and mystery surrounding Heather's tragic passing. What are your thoughts on the rumors and the conspiracy theories that continue to swirl around her from time to time?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's of course, going into it, we knew that there were some strong rumors going into it. And we even told the family, as documentarians, if we ever do come across anything that's true or that's like, not so flattering, we have a duty to present it. And they understood. They said that's fine. So we did, we didn't go into this project with any bit of a bias. We kind of, as documentarians, want to show things how they were. But we really went deep and kind of tried to we knew these rumors in the back of our head and pursued all of them, at least to see if there was any truth to any of it. And we went really deep and found nothing. I mean, we knew there'd be nothing, but at least we really went deep into anything that was being said. Kind of like her persona, any of it just opens herself to rumors. And then, of course, she worked in a time and in an era and with a lot of famous people like Steven Spielberg and Henry Winkler and some of these big names. So I think she kind of leaves, not because of anything she did, but it just makes her very susceptible to be a target for rumors.
Agreed. It was a perfect storm that made her viable for that to happen. Unfortunately, people just took it way too far because, as we know, some of those speculations or blinds had to do with how did she really pass away, and because of those within the studio system, allegedly, which we all know not to be true. Because as we discussed separately, Brian, if that was the case in the family's lawsuit and fight with the hospital, they would have brought that up, but they didn't.
Of course.
That.
I mean, the other side would have jumped on that so fast. I mean, if they would have said, and the thing is that was so great in general about kind of, being that they kept all the stuff from the lawsuit is we had medical records, we had medical examinations that were done on Heather a year before she passed away. I mean, any of these alleged things that happened would have showed up in all of these reports. It's one of those things where just, logically, there's no truth to it. But of course, that doesn't really matter to people who are sitting behind a computer and just making up stuff. And because it sounds good. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, the sad thing is, there was a ton of abuse that went on in the 80s on movie sets with different people. But just happy for Heather, that wasn't her story. She was very lucky that she was not only working with she worked with great people who were very protective, and also her mom was very protective. So I mean, she was a very protected person, and she just got lucky and worked with really great people. So it's kind of like, it's a sad thing they kind of try to make her the face of abuse when she wasn't. It's kind of like, it's just disrespectful to actual people who were abused, because it's kind of like, that's not Heather's story.
Back to Heather, Brian, there was also another rumor about grave robbing along those lines, and that both her father and her stepfather were there together. But another way to debunk that is they may have not necessarily been that friendly during that time period, as understandably things could be very awkward and that type of situation. But it's just lie after lie to feed a narrative.
Yeah, of course. I mean, a lot of them you'll read and you'll just kind of roll your eyes because they just sound so false. But it's like, one of those things where, I mean, there was that little blind item that went on there about something after she had passed away at the cemetery and desecrating her grave. I mean, it's disgusting for anyone to make it up. And I mean, it's like, just kind of, it's comical to me when I have so much knowledge, like personal knowledge about the family and how the situation was like. And just when you're reading some of these blind items, at least I'm able to read it and be like, I know this. I mean, even like this bother this responding to it, because it's kind of like, how much light do you want to give it? I mean, that's kind of the biggest, probably, I would say one of the biggest decisions and discussions that we had while making this documentary was, how much light do you give some of these rumors? Because once we've done our due diligence and we've completely debunked it, it's kind of like, it might be best not even to talk about it, because it's anyone who's going to choose to believe it is still going to choose to believe it, no matter what we say, because they're in that kind of conspiracy world where they just don't believe anything we say and just think everything's a cover up and everything's this. So it's kind of like, most people, when they're watching this documentary, have not even heard of some of these rumors. So it's like, we just want them to learn about Heather. So it's kind of like, why put that garbage in their mind? Someone makes something up. Of course, there's that part of me that wants to stand up on the top of a mountaintop and be like, this isn't true. Like, this is so false. But at the same time, it's kind of like, sometimes it's best to not really respond, or to kind of present, like, here's the real story of Heather. And so you will know it's not true because you are seeing the real story and you're knowing that this is just, there's no way this could be true. So it kind of makes it this weird spot. And even like you're saying with, the hard thing about the internet is that even when someone retracts something, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like you put it out there and it goes out there everywhere. And then like a week later, oh, here's a retraction. This is false. No one sees that retraction. It's already been republished and talked about. And like, people are not going to see the republication or the retraction. So it's kind of, it makes it why it kind of becomes kind of tattooed, it's kind of like throughout the years with Heather. Of course, the tabloids always would have a lot of stuff to talk about Heather, but that would just like about the poltergeist curse or whatever salacious kind of thing they want to make up or kind of put together that kind of will sell newspapers. But then the thing is, it'll be gone off the shelf in about a week and no one remembers it. Right. And then the internet comes on and then all of a sudden it gets tattooed on there. And so it's just there to stay. And so it's a lot harder for families and people when it comes to rumors and such, because they don't go away. It's just there, forever.
But from your perspective, that's just one example. What type of effect do you think that this could have on families and loved ones?
Well, I think that people minimize the impacts of online drama. And so here's what I can say as a therapist who has only done this for a year, and I'm certainly not famous. What I can share is my anecdotal data that being online can destroy your mental health. I was almost at a point where I didn't know, my therapist and I were talking about, I can only do this if it's not going to impact my mental health. And so whether it's a blind or gossip, it does have a rich history, right? And there's some parts of it that can be, cultural and not necessarily a bad thing. But we're talking about the intent behind the blinds. Is it intended to cause harm? Is it intended to smear somebody's name inaccurately, right? And they're not here anymore and cannot speak to some of the blinds and gossip. And so what I can say is that, and I am not anonymous, but the hate that I get is next level. And so I can only imagine, I get a teeny tiny little peek into it, and I can only imagine how sometimes some of these celebrities feel when they know maybe a blind is about them. It can create a sense of anxiety. It can create a sense of feeling unsafe. It can create, a sense of feeling the need to defend constantly and all of these things. And so I think that people don't realize actually the impact that these blinds can have on people, because we view celebrities, we have these like interesting parasocial relationships where it's like, well, I know them, so that gives me the right to talk about X, Y, or Z. And I just don't always subscribe to that, right? I get the juiciness that can come from that. And uh, I think Dumas is a good example of someone who does it right, for the most part. So I guess I just want to be really cautious how I step here, is that I believe it's usually two things can be true. It's not or, it's usually an and. So gossip blinds can be harmless and very harmful. Blinds can be really interesting and have psychological damage to the people that they're about and their families. Because it's an odd feeling to know that the internet is talking about you. And, you're just sitting in your home, like with your spouse, just like trying to be a person. And it's just it's a weird experience, if I'm being honest. So that's kind of my professional and personal insight or thought on that.
Agreed. And I feel like some blind writers, they are putting out material because that is really what's given to them. But they are saying, hey, this is not coming from me. This is coming from this person. And then there are other ones that are just blatantly making up lies. Again, whether or not it's the Heather Work situation, or also NT Lawyer did one on Kyle Marissa right after
relationships like this, or that I didn't publicly go scorched earth, or like none of my exes were famous, because like I would like 10 years later, if that shit was online and like everyone knew about it, dude, you guys would never, I would dye my hair black. I would use like white face paint. I would get prosthetics like Grimelda. You guys would never know I existed. You know what I mean? So,
right after her passing, and he was personally not a fan of hers, and I have text messages to prove that as well. But of course, I think he wanted, personally, I think he wanted clicks, and this is all allegedly. So then he made up blinds about how she passed away, and he has no credibility to that. That's very harmful. There was no autopsy done, and even when there was an autopsy released, a couple weeks later, there was another blind, alleging to it. So just that type of just blatantly making up something just for clicks, I think is very harmful. I don't think that that is anything that Dumois does. Not saying that she doesn't get it right sometimes, and that just maybe because of what's submitted to her, but they don't come anywhere close to being harmful like what we've been discussing.
Right. I think that to your point, posting a blind about someone who's just died uh, is certainly tasteless, but also extremely damaging because that person can't speak for themselves. And so I think that don't look at what people say, look at what they do.
Mhm.
Our actions show our true intent. And so this person can claim, well, no, I wasn't doing this, but you did it, right? You did it. So, and now imagine how her family must feel, right? A family who they're lost in grief. And now they are dealing with online gossip because somebody posted it, and there are people who receive that information who may not have a moral compass like you do, and they just love to pile on, and they love to spread rumors, and they love to do all these things, and I think that's intensely damaging for her family, and I feel very sad about that.
Yeah, me as well. And how crazy it spreads like wildfire. And let's say even if there was a retraction, no one ever hears the retraction. They just know what they know and go down the rabbit hole that they go down. Now, Melissa, in a world where it is so easy to find and spread information, do you think it is becoming at all dangerous for people to dive too deep into researching these blinds or gossip stories? Could there be unforeseen consequences for celebrities and their fans? Obviously, some, of course, turns out to be true. You just look at
Mhm.
the Puff Daddy situation, although who knows if all of it is true. There's definitely a lot of
Well,
truth,
there's a lot, yeah,
of
yeah. Mhm.
course. So at times it could be right, but again, is it dangerous for people to be diving into deep into blinds and gossip stories?
For the average person, I would say it's not healthy, and I'll tell you why. And this is just my opinion. I'm not saying that I'm right. This is just how I feel. Is that imagine all the time that people are spending trying to figure out these blind items. Essentially, what they're doing is distracting themselves from their stuff, right? We can, how we take in entertainment or anything says a lot about us. And so I think we can use things like this to distract from our own pain, from our own trauma, from our own lives. And if I'm being honest, you know, how a blind item about celebrity A, B, or C, how does that really affect me? Like, why do I need to know so much about that, right? It's really A, it's none of my business. B, if it is true, it'll come out in time. And if it's not true, it'll come out in time as well. And for me, it just feels like a waste of energy and brain space because there's just so many more important things I believe to focus on. But I also understand like the entertainment value, right? And just like that natural human desire to just know stuff. So there again, there's two sides to it. So I'm not going to say black and white in any way shape or form, but I definitely see the downsides, especially just again for folks like you and I, right? I need to focus on me and my stuff. And if I'm focusing on blind A or blind B, I'm not doing stuff. It doesn't serve me in any way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's definitely the mindset that I've taken on as well over the last year too. And oh my goodness, how much my energy could have been directed in other places as well. But I used it, I think, as an escape just because of the way that I grew up and, thinking back to the Sally Jesse Raphael days and,
Right.
all of those different Phil Donahue, all those different talk shows and the National Enquirer. I think that that was just my escape. And it's
Okay.
not wrong to have that escape, but again, you have to have critical thinking and how much of your brain space does it compromise? There has to be that balance to it. So I
Right.
completely
And
agree.
in fairness to you, we all have stuff we need a distraction from. My gosh, my life is a floating dumpster fire. But so it's like there is human nature where we seek things out just to kind of anesthetize ourselves a little bit, right?
Mhm.
It's hard to focus on our stuff and especially if we're having trouble dealing with it. So I just want to validate that that's a really human experience. And so I want people listening to this to understand this is, we're not bad people. It's just, it's great to know why we do what we do, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, having a hard time and then saying, okay, maybe I delved a little bit too deep in this and let me bring focus back to me. We're human. So I think we can only do better once we know better. And the definition of that is different for everybody.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Melissa, going back to the anonymous concept, which we did touch on a little bit at the beginning, there are multiple individuals that do have large following with celebrity blinds. One queen more so than the other, than someone else. But as someone who has dealt with trust and credibility in your profession, how do you feel that consuming and sharing information from someone whose identity we don't fully know? Because back in the day, the blind writers, we did know who they were, whether or not it was Ted Casablanca, whether or not it was AJ Benza or Perez Hilton. you know they were front and center with who they were, and they had to live by that, and their careers either had to go up and down because of that. But of course, the blind writers now all tend to be, anonymous. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that again, anonymity, if you're doing it for self-expression, great, but there's this toxic motivation to it that that really concerns me. And the thing that concerns me too, in the way that you are talking about this, what you just said before, absolutely true with Perez Hilton and all these folks. When they acted out of line, they had consequences for their behaviors. But when you're totally anonymous, you can essentially say whatever you want and have no consequences for behaviors. And one thing I can promise you is that lack of consequences or accountability breeds really bad stuff, really bad
Mhm.
stuff. Especially in some of these personalities that may be already primed towards antisocial conning kind of behavior. I do think it can be a breeding ground for ick. That's not a clinical term, but
Mm.
it can be a breeding ground for ick and bad behavior that then can just grow and left unchecked. eh, I can see how bad things happen, right? In the space that we're in now, where you can't even know the name of someone behind some of these. Um, yeah,
Yeah, and with the wrong person, it could feed the beast in the worst of ways.
correct.
Um, of course, there is a certain thrill to following anonymous sources like Enti or Dumois, But do you think anonymity makes it, well, we did talk about this, easier to spread more information, misinformation, but since we did touch on that, how should, though, pop culture fans approach blinds or rumors from anonymous sources?
So, what I will say, and I tell my audience this all the time, we have to be mindful about who we are letting in our brain space. And, I tell my listeners all the time, you love me and you think I'm great, but you got to think for yourselves. Number one. Number two, do not be mean to anyone on my behalf.
Mhm.
And number three, critically think about the information that you are allowing into your brain. So if it's a fun, silly, little kiki, whatever, fine. But I think it's important we have to be mindful about who we are standing, who we are putting on a pedestal, who we are allowing to give us a source of information. It's the people are always going to be there to feed us garbage. It's, do we allow it? Do we take it? And so, really, the answer is individuals just have to be able to discern the good blinds from the bad, or the good posters from the bad, maybe I should
Mhm.
say, since they are anonymous. Um, I encourage people to listen to your gut. If you are following someone like NT Lawyer, someone, and you're getting a feeling in your gut that's saying this doesn't feel right to me, listen to that. Right. When you, if you're looking at something from Dumois and all of that, right, that might be a very different feeling of like, okay, this feels like more fun and shade and less high stakes. Um, Listen to that gut and look at the behaviors, because people tell on themselves all the time. And so, unfortunately, it is up to us. We have to discern that. And, it's tough, but I think, Danny, what you're saying is you're in the process of discernment. Right? You're
Yes.
in process of saying, "Okay, well, I loved this and I'm seeing some darker side now, and let me evaluate." And literally that is the best we could hope for. As humans, we can only do better once we know better. And like, if we're listening to ourselves and we're saying, "This doesn't feel right for me," then all you can do, is follow that, I think.
Yeah, agree, and I think that's probably part of the reason why I still do listen to Demois.
Naked eye, I gotta cut the cord and fall away. An instinct I can justify.
Anon, please.
Dumois has the whole
What did
story.
Dumois say
Did you
about it?
hear what Dumois,
Dumois.
said? Who is it?
Can you believe this blind item?
Dumois was on that story a long time
Sunday
ago.
mean celeb sightings with
I just
Dumois.
DM'd
I
Dumois.
cannot believe what I just read about
I
on
need
Dumois.
more. I need to hear more.
Hello, and welcome to Do You, the show where you'll hear all the latest in celeb gossip and special exclusives that are not shared on my Instagram or anywhere else. I'll be your guide into the world of celeb news, sightings, and secrets. I will be giving you all of the information I have on your favorite topics every week.
This week, I'm talking about Paul Klein, role model, the Buccaneers, Bravo, and just like that, Chase Stokes and Kelsey Ballerini, and I answer some of your voicemails. Let's get
Demois.
started.
I like what she brings to the table. Again, I like her code of ethics, so to say. And I think that's the reason why she has a much better fan base
Mhm.
or following. She doesn't have like a bot army that goes after people, attacks people. I never see that in the
Right.
comments. But unfortunately, with the other person, I have seen that in the Facebook groups. I've seen that on Twitter, attacking female victims, allegedly
Yeah.
of his, and, scaring them off the face of the earth for some time, where, people are calling the police wondering if there needs to be a wellness check. But
Oh
I've
my God.
never seen that from Demois. I've never seen her fan base go crazy. I could have missed it. But
Well,
there's
but
definitely a different, and not saying that whoever follows, let's say, anti-lawyer is bad necessarily. There's bad apples in every group, and I've definitely seen some bad apples in that group. And, I used to be part of that group, not attacking people, but.
Sure. I think it is a hard realization to to say, I was a part of this group and now I'm second guessing it. And, it can create a lot of psychological havoc for folks like you. And also, I think that when you're looking at, does this person deserve my respect, I always recommend looking in the comment section on a post, right? Look in a comment section and see what is allowed to be said, what is not allowed to be said. In my comment section, I do not allow name calling, attacking. If people have differences of opinions and someone is attacking because they just don't agree, they got to go, right?
Mhm.
So basically, my community is my responsibility to manage effectively. And so if the question is this blind community for me, I recommend looking at the comments, right? Do you see things that are really super concerning and don't match your role of ethics, right? Your
Mhm.
personal ethics wheel? Then, you'll look and say, okay, then what do I need to do about this? But it's a hard process, to be fair. It's very hard.
Yeah, I think it is a really hard process. I'm personally happy I didn't start a podcast years ago like I would have. Um, because it would have been really, really blind focus, and then I would have been very intertwined. I do know of some other podcasts that have been blind focused that now I see them shifting like beyond the blinds. They used to cover a lot of anti-lawyers blinds and all they do here and there. It seems to be a shift of doing their own research, which I appreciate. So I just think
Mhm.
people need to take more of that approach. You can talk about a blind,
Yes.
but hey, where's the research to either back it up or disprove it? Otherwise, if it's just hearsay, does it really need to be talked about? Does it really need to be spread?
Boom. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
You said it. Hmm.
So on the last aspect of, being anonymous, do you think there's any deeper reason for someone to, as for final thoughts, for someone wanting to stay anonymous? Any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are some people who, okay, there are two groups of people that I have encountered. I've encountered folks in this space, podcasters, who I've been on their show and they remain anonymous because they may have a background in something that they don't. Like I get a lot of hate for being a therapist online. So my point is, I understand why people do
Mhm.
anonymity because sometimes I almost wish that I would have, but just for self-preservation. But there are always going to be people who like to use the cloak of anonymity to just do harm. And there are endless opportunities in this American society to do that, whether it's like online, being a troll, online gaming, that can be really tenuous, those kind of
Mhm.
communities and, things like Reddit and all of this other stuff. There's always a fine line between seeking to understand knowledge and using the cloak of anonymity to harm, to grift, to do to inflict feelings on other people that can make someone who's antisocial feel really happy and powerful. So that's what I would kind of say about that.
Yeah. Now, looking to the future, where do you see celebrity gossip and blinds going from here? With social media and instant access, do you think it will become even more invasive, or do you think we'll see a shift in how these stories are told? I feel like I've seen a shift of less blinds being told and more people doing the actual research. So I appreciate those that do it, but what are your thoughts, and how should fans approach these stories responsibly moving forward?
Well, to answer the second part of the question, I think you just said it really well, is to responsibly take in these blinds, you have to A, take it with a grain of salt. B, look at it in terms of how much time am I spending on this? What is that about for me? And number three, um, I think that societally speaking, because in addition to having a degree in psychology, I also have a degree in sociology. And societally, I do believe that we're seeing a shift to your point of people who have experienced generational trauma and they are looking to shift that narrative. And I think there are a group of younger folks and people who are tolerant and who are emotionally intelligent and who are believers in do no harm. And I do believe that we are seeing a little bit of a societal shift with that. However, what I know to be true about human behavior is that, there's always going to be a bell curve in terms of people who are moving forward from a place of morals and trying to be a good person and a good citizen. And then there are always going to be people who are trying to harm and grift and, be underhanded and make money. So I do feel like we may see a trend of it happening less, but I couldn't imagine a world where it's non-existent. And it doesn't have to be either. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
it should. But people, if you have antisocial traits, you can use anything as a weapon, anything.
Mhm.
So,
I mean, gossip has been around since the end of time, so definitely won't be going anywhere. Just like we breathe air, it will still be
right.
around, but hopefully it will be around in a more intelligent and thoughtful way.
Right.
But
Right.
Melissa, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say I think you're right in that it's about how we consume, what we
Mhm.
consume. Are we being thoughtful about it? Just like the food we put in our body, the information that we put in our brains is really important. So it's a good note to end on.
Yes, definitely. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure. Your insights into pop culture and the emotional side of celebrity gossip really gave us all something to think about. For those that are listening, if you haven't already, make sure to check out Melissa's Instagram and podcast, The Bish Therapist, spelled Bish.
Your Bish
Oh,
Therapist.
sorry.
That's okay.
Your
That's
Bish
okay.
Therapist.
Yes. Mhm.
So you won't want to miss the thoughtful and hilarious content she puts out, whether or not it's bite-sized bits. Is that the official name of it? I can't remember.
Bite-sized Bish. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Mhm.
So all different types of episodes that she puts out. And as we close this chapter of Pop Culture Exposé, I want to give a huge thank you to all of you for tuning in each week. It has been an incredible journey through the history and the drama of pop culture, and I'm so grateful for your support. But don't worry, we are just getting started. Next season, we're diving into even more pop culture deep dives. Until then, I'm Danielle, and this has been Pop Culture Exposé until we talk next time. And again, thank you so much, Melissa.
Thank you, Danny. Pleasure.
Thank you.
Tune into the buzz, it's the talk of the day. From Bravo shows to the latest celeb spree, we've got the tea, come sip it with me. Danny Gossip Girl, Pop Culture Exposé, we're spilling all the secrets every